Hello, praise the Lord. I thank and praise God for this time that He has given, and also ICPF for the opportunity to speak, even as India is celebrating 73 years of freedom today. There are certain issues and areas where we still haven't received freedom, and an Iraqi activist, Zainab Salbi, a women right activist said, I by no means intend to simplify the challenges women face in any culture. Women are marginalized in all cultures, in my opinion, some in more extreme ways than others. I'm going to talk about abuse. And abuse or violence is a broad term that can be used to describe the mistreatment of a person, uh, uh, animal activity, or even an idea. The abuse of women all alone is a broad topic because women all over the world suffer gross injustice as a consequences of cultural or religious practices. It is important to note that abusers and victims can be any gender and in any type of relationship. Since today ICPF is celebrating women in independence, I would like to focus on women as victims. In the United Nations Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, the term violence against women refers to any act of gender based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threat of such acts like coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or private life. Now, abuse is also called violence, regardless of whether a woman is physically assaulted. A key feature of domestic violence is the intentional control of another person through physical, sexual, psychological, social, or financial means. Abuse is more common than you might think, and statistics vary because many incidents are never reported. You have probably heard the most common statistic is 1 in 4 women will be victim of abuse at the hands of an abuse in their lifetimes. And another statistic shows that 4.8 million women experience domestic violence per year. Now, according to the Union Health Ministry, which released a report by National Family Health Survey, it stated that every third woman since the age of 15 has faced domestic violence of various forms in India. Now, when we know what abuse is, there are different types of abuses and like different kinds of abuses, and it's important to explore the forms of abuse in order to understand its impact. Domestic violence has a certain image associated with it because of how it's typically portrayed by the media. And also, we may conjure up images of black eyes or broken bones as portrayed in movies. Regardless of whether it is physical, emotional, or takes some other form, abuse often follows an escalating pattern in which the controlling behaviors worsen over time. The abusive partner may use operations systems already set in our society to assert our privileges, his or her privileges, against the other person. However, abuse is not always physical, and other forms can be just as damaging. So, I'm going to talk about different types of abuse. So, the first, there is physical abuse, perhaps the most recognized form. Physical abuse can include hitting, slapping, punching, or kicking, burning or strangulation, damaging personal property, refusing medical care and controlling medication, or coercing the person into substance abuse or use of weapon. The second kind of abuse is sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is not about sex, it's about power and includes any sexual behavior performed without a person's consent. Forcing the person to have sex with the other people, that's also called human trafficking. Then there's pursuing sexual activity within the victim when the victim is not fully conscious or is afraid to say no. hurting the person physically during sex, or coercing person to have sex without protection, or sabotage birth control. Then there is a psychological or emotional abuse. This occurs when a person seeks to control his loved one by name calling or insulting or blaming the person for everything, and extreme jealousy, intimidations, shaming, humiliating, controlling what the person does and where the person goes, stalking. Uh, Abuses may also make the victim question her own feelings and sanity, a tactic known as gaslighting. Then there is social abuse. It's common for an abuser to use social isolation to remove the victim from the support of friends and families in order to make her more vulnerable and dependent on them. They may be extremely jealous and monitor her communication with others. Then there is technological abuse. This form of abuse includes the use of technology to control and stalk. Technological abuse can happen to people of all ages, but it's more common among youngsters who use technology and social media to interact in a manner often unmonitored by adults. Examples: hacking into email and personal accounts, using tracking devices and cell phones to monitor their location, phone calls, and messages, monitoring interactions via social media, demanding to know passwords. Then there's financial abuse. Any behavior that maintains power and control over finances constitutes financial abuse. Examples include a person losing their job through direct and indirect means by inflicting physical harm or injury without that would prevent the person from attending work, harassing person at their workplace, controlling financial assets and putting the person on an allowance, damaging the person's credit score. Then there is also abuse by immigration status. There are specific tactics of abuse that may be used against immigrant persons. That's by destroying immigration papers, restricting the person from learning English, threatening to hurt the person's family in their home country, threatening to have the person deported. Then there's lastly teen dating abuse. Teen dating abuse is controlling, abusive, and aggressive behavior in a romantic relationship. It occurs in all relationships and can include any combination of verbal, emotional, physical, sexual abuse, and even financial abuse. It may start as early as middle school when youth start dating for the first time. The dangerous effects of teen dating, violence, and sexual assault can significantly affect the rest of the teenager's life if it is not prevented or stopped. Even after the violence has ended, victims are more likely to engage in high-risk behaviors, including binge drinking, cocaine use, suicide attempts, and eating disorders. So these are the various types of abuse that we see, and all these abuse, they have a pattern, or do I say they have a it's a cycle of abuse. So the cycle of abuse is different as by the ways in which an abusive individual keeps the target in a relationship, spanning subtle behaviors as well as physical, visible violence. There is a simple tool that describes what occurs in an abusive relationship. It is known, or it is called as the power and control wheel, and breaks down this abusive pattern in four phases or four levels. The first one, tension building. So this phase can last anywhere from minutes to weeks. In it, stress builds and abusers begin to feel wronged, ignored, and or neglected. They may accuse, yell, demand, or have unrealistic expectations, while the victim feels they have to walk on eggshells, are afraid, and also become anxious. Victims are by now are likely kind of familiar with the cycle or the pattern of the abuser, and believe making a small mistake will make the abuser angry. So instead they opt to stay quiet or do nothing. No matter what is said or done, however, it seems like the victim is never right, for the abuser, and the small incident can create a difficult situation in seconds. Now, the second phase or the second level is the incident. At this stage, the victim says or does something the abuser feels upset about or threatened by, and the abuser attempts to dominate the victim through verbal, physical, or sexual abuse. Now, victim may keep the incident a secret and not share what happened with others. In some cases, a victim of abuse can end up in the hospital and may even lie to the medical personnel about the causes of the injuries. Then comes the third phase or third level, that's reconciliation. At this point, the abuser might feel remorse or fear and try to initiate a reconciliation. This can entail them having a good behavior, having sweet talks, or buying flowers, gifts, taking the victim out for dinner, or suggesting a nice occasion. They often promise it will be the last time the abuse happens. The victim experiences pain, humiliation, disrespect, and fear, and may be staying for financial reasons or because children are involved. Then comes the final stage comes calm, also known as the honeymoon stage. As the abuser is kind, calm, and interested and may engage in counseling as well as asking for forgiveness, the victim may believe the abuser has changed and accept the apology. A perpetrator then starts to find little flaws or behaviors that they criticize in a passive-aggressive way and apologies become less sincere over time. Little by little, the same behavior begins to reappear, and the cycle again returns to the first phase, that's the tension building phase. So this is a cycle of abuse that the abuser follows. And now when we have seen the different types of abuse, we have seen the cycle of abuse. Now, how do we find that someone is in an abusive relationship or someone has gone through some abuse or violence? So we need to look out for the warning signs. So some of the signs of abuse, such as physical marks, may be easy to identify. Abuse affects each person differently, but it impacts everyone both physically and psychologically. It's often an aggregate of related signs of abuse that tips someone of that a person is at risk. Abuse can happen to anyone regardless of their social, educational, or financial status. While red flags aren't always proof that someone is being mistreated in this way, they are worth knowing. Many who are abused may try to cover up what is happening to them for a variety of reasons, and it goes without saying that these individuals could benefit from help. Now, the physical signs of abuse is if someone is physically abused, they will likely to have frequent bruises or physical injuries with being punched, choked, or knocked down, and they are likely to have weak or inconsistent explanation for injuries. Some signs of physical also include black eyes or bruises on the arm, busted lips, red or purple marks on the neck, sprained wrists. It's also common for someone to try to cover up their physical signs with clothing. For example, you may notice that someone you care about is wearing long sleeves or scarves in hot summer, wearing heavier than normal makeup, or donning sunglasses inside are also common signs of physical abuse. Emotional signs of abuse is, of course, can take a serious emotional toll, creating a sense of helplessness, hopelessness, or despair. Abuse can cause people to believe that they will never escape the control of the abuser. They may also exhibit a constant state of alertness to the point they never can completely relax. Then the emotional signs, other emotional signs of abuse can include agitation, anxiety, or constant apprehension, change in sleep habits, or sleeping too much, or they're deprived of sleep. Then developing a drug or alcohol problem, extremely apologetic or meek. They have loss of interest in daily activities. They have very low self-esteem. They seem fearful. And also you will see symptoms of depression in victims who have gone through emotional abuse. And also they also talk about or they attempt suicide. Now, how all these abuses cause behavior changes in the victim. If you notice that someone who was once outgoing and cheerful has gradually become quiet and withdrawn, it could be a sign of domestic abuse. You may notice that the person becomes reserved and distant, begins isolating themselves by cutting off contacts with friends and family members, cancels appointments or meetings with you at the last minute, or drops out of activities they would usually enjoy, exhibits excessive privacy concerning their personal life or the person with whom they are in a relationship, is often late to work or to other appointments. So that affects the behavior of the victim. And they also show signs of fear. So people who are being abused may seem anxious or nervous when they are away from the abuser, or they may seem overly anxious to please their abuser. If they have children, the children may seem timid, frightened, or extremely well behaved when the abuser is around. Although victims may not talk about the actual abuse, they might refer to the abuser as moody or having bad temper. They may reveal that the abuser is particularly bad tempered when drinking alcohol. Sometimes the fear of victim of abuse experiences is so intense that they feel paralyzed to make decisions or to even protect themselves or their children. When the fear gets to that point, they will even turn down help offered to them by friends, family, or even professional protective services. If you notice that someone seems to be controlled or extremely manipulated in all areas of their life, it could be a sign that they are being abused at some level. Now, some examples of control, like how the abuser is controlling, is like the victim is asking permission to go anywhere, or to meet and socialize with other people, constant calls, texts, or tracking by their partner, wanting to know where they are, what they are doing, and who they are with, or having very little money available to them, not having access to credit card, or having to account for every penny spent. They're not having access to vehicle or proper transportation, referring to their partner as jealous or possessive, and always accusing of having affairs. Now, these are signs and behaviors of an abusive victim. And now, how can we help, or how can we help to address this cycle of abuse? Now, it's not always easy for a person to know they are in an abusive relationship, as an abuser may disguise their behavior or character the early stages of relationship. Often controlling and possessive behaviors do not rear their ugly heads until the bonds of relationship grow tight. While every relationship is different, most abusive relationships have one aspect in common. An abusive partner takes action to have more power and control over their partner. Understanding how the cycle of abuse works can help a person determine if they are caught in an abusive relationship. Additionally, learning about community resources and seeking guidance and assistance from mental health professionals like counselors or counseling psychologists can also make it easier to leave a relationship when an abused person is ready to do so. I would say the best way to end the cycle of abuse is through psychoeducation, or getting educated, and with the help of a professional, mental health professional, or a counselor. So, several private counselors and counseling agencies help survivors of abuse. Counseling provides a victim with a place to vent out their cries, to receive support, heal, and forgive. All necessary aspects to end the cycle of abuse. Counseling also can help educate the victim about the patterns of abusive behavior, as well as explore possible early trauma that may contribute to the unhealthy relationship expectations. If you believe something is not right in your relationship and may not be able to confront the situation on your own, it's better for you to ask for help. Even after the survivor, even after the survivor finds safety and supportive people, the person may continue to use these coping strategies until they realize they are no longer necessary or helpful. Another way of coping could be support groups that may be a good step in the healing process for the victim. So these are the ways where we can approach the victims, or the victims could be approached with counseling and with support, with our presence with them. Now, uh, what does the Bible, or what's the Christian perspective of dealing with abuse? Now, violence against women happens in every faith community. Abuse within Christian families can be well hidden or vehemently denied, but the fact remains that abuse does happen. Women look for meaning for their life, for their from their faith community. If they are being abused, they seek to understand why this is happening and what an appropriate response would be. When a woman meets silence about this topic, she has to draw her own conclusions. Women who are being abused are not choosing their suffering, it is involuntary. Nothing good can come out of it. Enduring a beating hurts everyone. The woman who's getting beaten, the man who is sinning, and the children who witness it. If Jesus was in the room, he would intervene. He would help the women and her suffering. Feeling Jesus' love means that women can walk out of the door safely, out of the door to safety. Some women stay in abusive situations because they hope their marriage will get better. Maybe their husband will see the light and stop hurting them. I've read that feminist theologians join the social workers in saying that suffering is not an effective way to change an abusive situation. There are many other options today that are more effective than suffering. Leaving a violent situation forces the person or the abuser who's abusing to face what they are doing, so that they can get help. In abusive relationships, abuse usually gets worse over time, not better. God does not intend women to suffer abuse. The word gospel means good news. Christian faith must bring good news to women trapped by abuse. The church should concern itself with preaching and empowering women to leave situations of violence and abuse. Moses led the people of Israel from suffering to freedom. Jesus healed the woman who was considered unclean. He saved the life of a woman caught in adultery. He spoke to the Samaritan women. Jesus treated women with dignity and respect. He heard their stories of suffering and tried to help them out of their suffering. As 2 Samuel chapter 22 verse 49 says that God hates abuse, viewing it as sinful and unacceptable, and delights in rescuing the oppressed. This testimony isn't always easy for us to believe, though. It's not always easy for us to believe, though. In daily life, many abuse sufferers can struggle to see God at work as they cry out asking to be rescued, just as David did many times in Psalms. Holding this tension is important. Suffering and pain are real, but deliverance is real too, even if it doesn't come when or how we wish we did. The doctrine of Imago Dei, locates women's dignity not so much in their status in relation to men, but in their image of the Creator. If Christians are to pursue restoration of women's dignity, they will need to dismantle several obstacles and undertake a process of education, restitution, and restructuring. How can the Christians support those who suffer abuse? Some guidelines are: the damage done by abuse can be devastating. The damage is often psychological, as I said before. The damage could be psychological, physical, and emotional, and most assuredly spiritual. Those who suffer abuse are in need of support, encouragement, and concern. This support may be tangible, such as through help with basic necessities like housing, childcare, and food. It may also be intangible, such as spiritual support, prayer, and someone to listen to their cries. We need to realize that the abused person may need professional help and counseling to address issues related to the abuse from someone specially trained. We need to support their decision, especially in Christian thing, when someone talks about reaching out. There's still a stigma when people reach out to counselors, but we need to respect and support the decision to seek outside assistance when needed. To talk with someone on his journey requires commitment, and the church should commit to this journey to the best of our ability. We need to understand that the process of healing for someone who has been abused may take time. We also understand that the healing journey may be different for each person. Our commitment to them is not limited by time but rather by need, and we should be available to provide every kind of support to the victims. And we also need to acknowledge those who have been abused, have been denied the right to decision makers in their own lives. The best way to help those who have been abused is to empower them, make decisions that directly affect them. We do not want to take the place of the abusive person by telling them what they can and cannot do or what they should and should not do. Therefore, we will help them explore options. Let's not give them advice or suggestions. We'll work alongside them in exploring options and voice our concerns when it is appropriate. We need to affirm their need for safety in all relationships. Uh, if we cannot know what each family will need and where they will end up, the relationship may or may not be restored, but we can walk with them through this painful process of rebuilding and healing. The healing process begins with the first contact they make. I want to repeat this. The healing process begins with the first contact they make with someone whom they can tell about the abuse and continues for a long time. So let's all be vigilant to the cries of the women who have been through abuse. We may not know their pain, we may not know their situation, but at least when we are being approached, when we are being asked for help, let's listen to their cries and walk with them in that painful process of rebuilding and forgiveness and healing. Before I end, I would just like to end with a verse from Psalms chapter 10 verse 14, which says, "But you, God, see the trouble of the afflicted. You consider their grief and take it in hand. The victims commit themselves to you." So let's just continue to be vigilant and sensitive to women and help them to overcome and be an independent women facing every fear and helping them to gain strength and educate each other and be responsible in restoring someone's life. Thank you.